Welcome back to our next episode of our 3 for 3 podcast, where three guys give 3 or 4 opinions on one particular topic. My name is Mark Bates. It's good to have you back here for our next episode. We will share the topic of the episode in a few minutes. As I've shared before, I'm a math professor at Oxnard College in Oxnard, California, and I teach as well as at Pepperdine University in Malibu, as well as making a variety of games under the Studio Infinite Pi Games. Now that I'm done shilling, I'll pass on over to my co-host, Don Patterson. Go ahead, Don.
Hi, my name's Don Patterson. I'm a literature professor and film studies professor. I am coming to you from Southern California, where in addition to my work in cultural critique, I work as a computer scientist and academic for LedgerLink. Kick it over to you, Ed.
Well, hello, my name is Edward Song, and I'm the Steven Spielberg Professor of Film Arts, Film Criticism, and Creative Writing at George Fox University in Newberg, Oregon.
He has a named chair.
I'm very glad to be here, thanks. Thank you for having me today.
As you can tell, we always pick our topic selection around what the job descriptions of these two gentlemen are going to be. So wow, how funny that we have two eminently qualified people, and then just me, a regular layperson with a T-shirt that tells people to read as a public service announcement. Our topic today is best movies made from books. A very genre. So best movies made.
I thought we were talking about French fries today. I'm not prepared for this.
Or best
beach
books
restaurants.
Book made from movies. Are there books made from movies? I think that there was a Star Wars book that was written after the movie came out. I don't know.
Lots of Star Wars books.
Lots of Star Wars books. But best movies made from books. So I'm going to be kind of doing background on this. Very interesting to kind of mix these two genres, right? Of course, books have been around for, obviously many centuries, if not millennia, in some form or another. But movies have really only been relatively new. I mean, we'd be generous to say that the movie genre is 150 years old. Kind of when we get into more current movies, we're barely at 100 years, if that. Looking up kind of the first documented movie made from a book was actually a French movie. Which is a version of Cinderella. But by the way, if you say oui, oui, that is 2 more words than were in the actual movie, because the movie had no dialogue. It was 6 minutes long. I imagine 1899. I imagine it probably was in black and white. But you can kind of see that in the history of movies, actually, there were a number of early movies that were taken from classic literature. And
wait, can I clarify?
You may.
So you're referring to the first movies made from books. These movies had no words in them.
Yeah, no, not necessarily. I mean,
so you would say not strictly faithful to the original text.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, do we have to be faithful to the original text or the original story? I mean, that's a really good question. We're going to talk about that when we discuss what qualifies as a quality movie made from a book. So
that's why I'm a professor of film studies.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Looking forward to reading your dissertation that you haven't written yet about that. So, okay. Well, so before I talk about this kind of idea that we do of planting the flag, I want to talk about a few challenges to this topic. So one very basic challenge, I suppose, in our culture today is that people simply don't read as many books, especially books that they would read for entertainment, right? So they don't read quite as many books. When there are movies made from books, I just hear a lot of people say, oh, it's just too easy to watch the movie, right? Why spend all the time reading the book when you can watch the movie? The other challenge to this on the flip side is that, and we're going to talk about this when we talk about my opinion about what makes a good movie made from a book, is that movies can have a hard time containing all that's in a book. I mean, we're not just talking about the fact that a book of any significant length is going to have more plot than a movie, but of course, well-written books have things like character development, thoughts that the person is thinking, maybe some different point of view of how the story is being told. And that's going to be a little bit harder to depict in a movie. Of course, movies can add a lot of great elements. We'll talk about that. And then also, I'll just be frank, for those of us that do read books, and there are at least a few people around that do read books. I don't know. The question is, are people too faithful to the book? In our house, we have some movies that we will not watch because we have read the book and we're afraid that the movie is going to spoil the book, right? So that's going to be some kind of contrast there. They are different, kind of generally different genres, and while they can be telling the same general story, we have to be careful about which if one kind of discolors the other in a certain way. So what makes a great book? What makes a great book? This is kind of the first step of movies made from books. We kind of have to start with a great book. We have to start with a book that's critically acclaimed. We have to start with a book that is actually read by many people. Now, I will tell you a great movie made from a book that doesn't qualify on my list, and that is the movie Die Hard. Die Hard was actually taken from a book, which is the second book in a detective series by Roderick Thorpe called Nothing Lasts Forever, a 1979 book, which became a 1980s hit movie. But no one maybe people remember that there was a book. It says it in the opening credits when we watch it again this Christmas. It is based on a book.
I think an important rule should be that the movie has to have the same name as the book. If you're changing the movie title...
No. I think what's important here is the pairing. I don't think it has to be a great book. I think we're evaluating the movie and we're evaluating the two together. And so they have to stand as a pair.
Well, listen, I want to be really clear about the fact. When we get to our episode on best Christmas movies, spoiler alert, Die Hard's going to make my list. Okay. But for those of you either on this call or at home who think that Die Hard is one of the three best movies made from books, I'm going to tell you right now you're wrong. Because the book part of it kind of doesn't hold up, right? It might be a great book. I haven't read it. Guess what? 17 people have probably actually read the book that Die Hard is based on. Okay. And
I actually retract the thing that I just said earlier, because now that I think about it, I think one of my selections violates that rule.
Right.
I'm actually not sure.
That's right. And by the way, those of you playing at home, one of the joys of this podcast is not just seeing what we're going to say are our three best movies made from books, but which one of the three of us is actually going to break the rules of our own podcast? Okay,
and which one of the three of us are right?
That's right. Well, that's kind of always me, but you get the idea here. Okay, now let's just talk about so the first thing that qualifies for a good movie made from a book is the book has to be a good book. It has to be critically acclaimed. It has to be a good book. It has to be well known. Okay. Second, kind of planting the flag in the ground. The movie does have to have great production value. So here it gets a little tricky because now you're bringing in elements that are probably more uniquely movie elements, but you need to bring in great production value, and you should be able to enjoy and fully appreciate the movie without even ever having read the book. Okay. Now, of course, I said not a lot of people read books. I think it will be your appreciation will be enhanced if you have read the book, but it shouldn't be necessary. It shouldn't be the movie
100%.
shouldn't have to rely on your knowledge of the book in order to
100%.
carry it. Right?
Yep.
It should do that. Okay. And the third is that this is the tricky part, right? They're two totally different genres, but they should be able to add to each other in a different way. You should be able to experience them in whatever order you experience them and have one kind of enhance the other. And so if you watch the movie first and say, I want to go back and read the book, and the movie does kind of color your experience of the book, it should still enhance what's in the book. And of course, for those of us that read the book and then watch the movie, right, that should be, the book should enhance what's being shown in the movie as well. And then I think lastly, for me, this kind of holds true for all of the things that I've looked for, all the movies that are on my list, there should be some kind of iconic performance. Movies can be beautiful in and of themselves, but and most books have a plot that is character driven, and there should be some kind of iconic performance by at least one actor that brings out that this movie brings out the best of one or more actors involved in the process. So a lot of things here around the flag that I call best movies made from books. There are certainly plenty movies that qualify that are a little bit further away from the flag, but I know I have the three best in my head. But we're going to start.
We will see. We will see.
With
wait, can I just ask before? Have you all read the books for all of your movie choices?
In my case,
parts
yes.
of them.
In my case,
parts of them. Parts of them is what the student says when they haven't done the reading that day.
Well,
so I think we know what Professor Patterson has been doing. I've only read one of the books of my three.
Okay.
And I also just want to say that I feel really good about my three selections. It'll be interesting to hear whether our three overlap or not, but I feel good about how I've thought about this. But I also want to say that more important to me is what doesn't get mentioned today. Mm-hmm. So I'm just drawing a line in the sand right now that if there are orcs or elves or people with hairy feet or wizards, then somebody's going to start getting upset.
There are two. So there's this weird counterexample of a book made from a movie. So if you're familiar with the movie The Abyss, the movie came out first and then the book was written. And the book is long. It's a big old novel. And I actually read the book first that was made from the movie and liked the book a lot more than the movie. It was very strange to have a book made from a movie and then like the book better. And then in terms of major disappointments, and I hope this is in your top three, but man, you're talking about not wanting to watch a movie lest it ruin the book experience. The Chronicles of Narnia movies. Oh gosh, I love those books. I love them, but the movies are just awful. And I think C.S. Lewis.
The movies were perfectly fine, and I think they're remaking all of them or making a third one.
Even though they were fine last time, why would they remake them if they were so good before? That's unlikely. That they were
what's the name of the
C.S. Lewis, the author? C.S. Lewis was very much against having his books turned into movies, but part of that was because his idea of how it was going to end up being was some guy walking around in a lion costume for Aslan. He didn't have the CGI experience. But nevertheless, his opinion was right. His books should never be turned into movies. They're not made for that.
Well, there are some other Oxford professors whose books never should have been made into movies.
Okay, we'll jump into it then, because
with that being
this is going to be bad.
Let's go. Let's start with Don Patterson. Don Patterson, we're going to start with our number 3. What is your number 3 movie made from a book?
Okay, I gotta provide my own context here. So, what made the best movies made from books for me were their emotional impact on me, their core faithfulness to the themes of the novel, even if it wasn't even if it wasn't exactly a reproduction of the novel. It's the themes and the faithfulness of the themes, and of course you got to be able to recognize the book as well. And then also cinematic achievement, that the movie itself really achieved something in its particular context. And so all of my movies were very, very strong in the moment. They're all very much products of their time when they were produced and made. But I think that the themes really are sort of timeless in a lot of ways, the truths that they bring out. And after I picked my movies, I went back and I was thinking about why did I think these were all so epic or so important? And I realized that a big theme running through all of my movies was themes of masculinity, themes of mental health, actually, turns out, and then themes about big questions of life, the big, overarching questions of being human and stuff. And so, with that said, I'm not going to have any Jane Austen in my list. So not that those weren't good, but they just didn't have the emotional impact on me. So with that said, my number 3 book, number 3 movie made from a book is Fight Club. Ooh. Fight Club, for me, was a very interesting movie. It was very violent. It was very dark. I'm not sure it's the most uplifting movie, but it was mysterious. It was dark. It had a very specific aesthetic. I think artistically, it was really timely, explored these themes of consumerism and mental health and masculinity. And the like cinematic aesthetic really mirrored really what was going on in the protagonist's mind at the same time. And so in that way, I thought that the movie itself did what books can do through exposing the thought pattern of people in the movie. The movie did it through the cinematic visual element of it as well. So
I'm sorry, just a random question. Is there a book there from the movie? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah,
from a book.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah, it's kind of
you read the book.
The book has been in my hands.
The AI synopsis of the book, the clip.
No, the actual book. The actual book has been held by me.
I've read the book. ChatGPT.
For those of you younger people,
what's the Fight Club novel about?
Cliff's Notes is like AI for us, like 40 years ago. Okay, so if we didn't want to read a book, we went and we bought these little yellow pamphlets called Cliff's Notes, and that was reading the book. Okay,
I didn't know there was a book until my kids read it. My kids were reading it, and I didn't realize there was a book behind it till that showed up. Another thing about the movie, though, that I thought was really good in sort of like it really confused the what it was critiquing, sort of consumerism and toxic masculinity. It confused the critique of it with kind of the glamorization of it. So at the same time, both those things were going on in the movies. And I would say that it's a little bit like Hunger Games was like that, where like you're going to this movie about people being thrown into an arena that's a critique of sort of this people battling against each other. But also the movie itself is a glorification of that, or sort of a celebration of it. So in that way, the movie really acts as a mirror rather than a moral critique. And I just think it's just a very compelling, albeit very dark and violent movie. So I think in a lot of ways the acting was brilliant. Brad Pitt did a great job in it. I thought it broke new ground. I think so. That's my number 3, Fight Club.
Okay, number 3. Okay, Ed Song, what's your number 3?
Okay, well, first I just wanted to describe my criteria as well. There are lots of different ways of approaching this. Is it like the greatest movie that happened to be made from a book? In which case you could just look at like the American Film Institute's list of top 100 movies and just pick the top 3 that happen to be made from books. That's not how I thought about it. To me, they, one, have to be like real books that are famous before people read them. So for example, Shawshank Redemption is on almost everybody's like list of top 50 movies. I think that was based on a short story by what's his name? Thank you. But like that doesn't count. I mean, I don't know, but I don't think that was like the super popular book that everybody was reading, and then they made the movie. So it has to be like a real book that people read. Equally, it has to be a movie that is like really rooted in the book. Sometimes movies will the idea starts from a book, but the movie itself ends up being very, very different. Bong Joon-ho has this new movie, Mickey 17. I understand that that's based in a novel called Mickey 7. He's added 10 Mickeys. But the movie is very, very different from the book. So that also violates like real book that people that violates my second thing. And then my third thing actually is that the movie has to do a better job of realizing the aims and purposes of the book than the book actually does. And so there are lots of movies that you might think of, like Don mentioned the Jane Austen movies. Like all the Jane Austen movies are awesome, but I don't know if watching any of them is like better than reading a Jane Austen book. And so
it's faster.
And it's easier to eat popcorn and not like get butter stain your pages. But in any case, so no Jane Austen for me. What else got ruled out? Well, anyways, I'm just stalling. I should get to my number 3. I feel really good about my top 2. I was debating on what to do with number 3. I was thinking of going conventional, but I ended up choosing Jaws. Jaws was a novel that I think was published in something like 1974. I haven't read it for what it's worth.
I have.
But it was it was a critical success. And then you also are well familiar with the shores of New England and
yes.
Anyways, but Jaws, so I haven't read the book, but Jaws obviously is an amazing movie. It was a leap forward in terms of cinematic technology. Like, I think the shark in the movie, nobody had ever seen anything like that before. Oh, anybody who's been to the Los Angeles Hollywood Universal Studios tour is well familiar and with the
sharks jumping at you.
Yeah, with the animatronic shark. I mean, now it obviously seems like a little bit hokey, but in the day it was.
I was on that ride in like 1979, I think, as like a second grader, and I was terrified. I was terrified of that shark jumping at my little Universal Studios tram. And not only did I read the book, but I also saw the movie at someone's home on a reel-to-reel. They like rented a reel-to-reel version of Jaws from like some rental service where you could watch it at home, and they had a Jaws party. Like, traumatic. What were my parents thinking? Mom, Dad, if you were listening, let's put some money in the counseling jar.
We call it reel to reel because it's real old to watch something reel to reel. Just want to tell you. Okay.
But to me, like, what's great, the movie like really realizes the purpose of the book better than the book does. And so there's a way in which the movie, I think, actually supersedes the book as an artistic achievement. And is itself a notable piece of film. It's one of, if I had done more research on this, I would have told you whether it was Steven Spielberg's first movie. Maybe it wasn't his first movie, but it was his first big movie, and is still an excellent movie. Maybe I saw it like 5 years ago again, and it's an excellent movie, excellent performances.
Another fun fact is that I have gone swimming at the bridge where they filmed the movie, and the kids are jumping off a bridge into the ocean, and like Jaws is swimming around, and it's like the terror that he's about to attack them. Yeah, I've gone swimming there and jumped off bridges, and my kids have too. We love it because it's so pseudo dangerous. Hopefully pseudo.
Okay, so Jaws is my number 3.
Okay, well, my number 3 already. My two co-hosts have panned my number 3 pick incorrectly. My number 3 pick is Pride and Prejudice. Number 3 pick.
Which one?
Which one? The 1995 film with Colin Firth. Now,
okay.
I'm going to tell you that I'm breaking the rule just a height bit because it originally came out as a 6-part miniseries.
Yeah, it's not a movie; it's a miniseries.
It's fully in the movie category. It runs 5 hours long. It can be watched continuously. It fully falls in the movie category.
If it never played in a movie theater, it's not a real movie.
I'm sure that it has played in a movie theater at some point in time. I don't think that's an issue, Ed Song.
My favorite movie is actually a video game.
Well, it's better than Padaro Beach Grill, so let me just say that. Okay, so
literally a restaurant.
So Pride and Prejudice. I think there are a number of Jane Austen adaptations that would qualify here, but I do think the 1995 Pride and Prejudice is the best of them. Well known, of course, by the iconic performance of Colin Firth. And so my number 3 pick is Pride and Prejudice, the 1995 version by Colin Firth. Okay.
Man, you're falling into a trap because Pride and Prejudice is such a good story, and you're losing track of the value of the story versus the movie.
100%.
It seems like one of you is clearly showing Pride and the other one is clearly showing Prejudice. So I think I'm right on track. Okay, I'm the only one bringing a little bit of sense. I'm the only one bringing a little bit of Sense and Sensibility. Okay, Don Patterson, your number 2 pick.
Okay, my number 2, again, exploring big themes, is
I'm so afraid
Lord of the
what you're
Rings. Lord of the Rings, but more specifically, the first one, Fellowship of the Rings. And my argument is that Tolkien is foundational literature, fundamentally core literature in the Western canon. the themes of the book are like deeply Christian primarily from like a Catholic perspective, and really lend themselves to a lot of like deep thinking about themes about life and everything. I see in it Tolkien really working out a lot of the trauma that he experienced in World War One, and sort of trying to figure out how to reconcile what he experienced in the real world by writing about it in Middle Earth. And so, like, for me, there's this really deep connection between faith and war and mental health. And it's a very masculine movie because it's all people fighting, and all the main characters are men-ish running around, or male things running around. I feel like male things. I feel like Jackson's adaptation was really, really deep. He spent a lot of time coming up with the culture and the sort of like visual aesthetic, again, of these different cultures within the movie. And the thing that I really like about the first one is that it doesn't lean heavily into the CGI. Like the later ones are like over the top CGI, everything. These did not lean quite so much into the CGI. And I love the first one because it's like you see the reveal of Peter Jackson's vision of what Middle Earth is in New Zealand. And you see the reveal of Gandalf, and you see what, how the ring is going to be portrayed. And you meet the dwarves, and you meet the hobbits and everything. And like, I love that, that sort of like pulling back the curtains on this artistic vision of how this world is gonna sort of emerge. And so, I mean, he just did a killer job. Like, no one's ever going to make another version of Lord of the Rings that's ever going to stand up to that. They might do some other media, but video game or AR or VR or something. But like, that's just going to stand forever. My only criticism of it.
Go ahead.
Yep. My only criticism of it is that Ed is wrong. My two criticisms are that Ed is wrong, and the second criticism is that the original books are not exactly quite so realistic as Jackson interpreted them. Like, Jackson's vision of the Lord of the Rings and Middle Earth is very much like a realistic, integral world. Like, there's magic in it. I don't mean there's not magic in fantasy, but all of it has like an internal consistency that feels realistic. But I think that the original Lord of the Rings had these cartoonish elements in it. Like the fact that the hobbits eat all these meals throughout the day, like elevensies and second breakfast and everything. Like, I think that's cartoonish, not meant to be like a description of a real character. But Jackson decided the way that it was going to be rendered was through a realism. And so as a result, you just say, okay, that's real for hobbits. So I find it a beautiful, amazing, epic work of art. I think it does a good job of reflecting back on the themes that are in the original book. And there are all kinds of criticisms about it. Like, pieces are left out, and the movie happens much faster than the book happens in terms of like temporal compression and stuff. But notwithstanding the presence of orcs and hairy feet, Lord of the Rings, specifically the Fellowship of the Rings, is my number 2.
Professor Tolkien.
I will say, hold on, before we get to Ed, I will say two things about Don's pick that I'm in defense of. One is that I haven't seen all of those movies, but it is true that probably in our next 50 years, no one is going to redo those movies like Peter Jackson did, or no one's going to want to redo them because they can't be as good as him. I believe, well, of course, I think The Return of the King, the third movie, is it third or fourth movie? I guess the third movie.
Return of the King is the third in the series.
Third. Yeah. I believe it won Oscar for Best Picture, which I think is very rare. I think it did. I think it won Oscar for Best Picture.
No, it did. I'm just shaking my head at the madness of it all.
Because a movie with orcs has a Best Picture award?
No, not even. I mean, Professor Tolkien will have to rise from the dead and write 3 more books just to channel the trauma that he doubtlessly experienced at the creation of those abominations. Those movies are awful, even as just like Hollywood popcorn movies.
Okay.
Nonsense. They're brilliant.
They're abominations.
They're
abominations.
Fun. They're escapism. They reflect the original movies.
They're poorly made. And I think you're actually exactly wrong on the realism of it. The books are myths. You know, so like they invented the genre of fantasy novel in the 20th century. but they themselves are not work of like fantasy as we now know it. They're like works of myth. So I think one of the problems of the movies is that they get the aesthetic wrong. They should be more real. And the problem is that they're all filmed in like this glossy haze. Every shot is like hazy and mysterious.
Uh-huh.
And then just like the some of the aesthetic choices that they make are risible. Which is a word that I only use when I'm really upset at something. Like,
it has full of riz?
when Gandalf grows all big and scary, when Bilbo won't give him the ring at the beginning is cartoonish. When
It's
Galadriel
great.
does the same thing and
I
turns into
love
this,
that.
it's awful.
I love that. No, it's just
It's
close
awful.
no, it's
Theoden's
reflecting
makeup, when they get to him in whichever of those books, it looks like he was opening up a bag of flour and exploded in his face. Like,
No,
that's
it's-
how we're going to
it.
portray
The scene
somebody.
in the beginning,
It's awful.
the scene in the
whole
beginning
thing is awful.
when the dwarves show up to Bilbo's house because of the secret sign on the door, and then they sit around smoking their whatever weed and start singing their song about the Misty Mountains. Man, that scene, I just think that's an amazing scene. And they're just amazing
Smoking
scenes throughout the
whatever
whole thing.
weed is the only way to get through those movies. Is what I've.
I mean, for movies that represent smoking weed, that was a pretty amazing scene.
We are reaching movie length with this podcast, which coming to a local theater near you, maybe with a trailer and some popcorn. But okay, well, Ed Song, your number 2.
All right. So I apologize, dear listener, for the assault on common sense and appreciation of our artistic canons in the Western literary tradition that my co-host has offered. So now I'll bring it back. And let me just remind you, my criteria: real book, movie has to do a better job of realizing the purposes of the book, which is a hard thing to do, right? Because it's like, you got to be starting with a great book, and like, what could be better than a great book? Well, Friends, my number 2, and I really wrestle between number 1 and 2, but my number 2 does that in spades. It is a beloved movie by young and old alike. And my number 2 movie is Princess Bride. Princess Bride, as we all know, is like a beloved children's book. If I'm being honest, I haven't read it. But anyways, we won't let that get in our way of pontificating informed opinions. But it's obviously it's a classic movie.
Read.
And it does a good job of capturing the comic elements of the book, at least from what I'm told by people who've actually read the book. But it's obviously an extraordinary movie that it's hilarious, rich, classic rich performances. There might be no more movie that is as quoted as Princess Bride, and it just does this incredible job of like realizing the purposes again of this book that I haven't read. But it's
for an endowed chair of classic literature. How few books you've actually read? That's really wow.
Well, when we get to the podcast on philosophy and political philosophy, I'm going to blow you guys out of the water. But I haven't yet finished my PhD in children's literature. I am, however, really a professor of
You're like the
film.
professor who cried wolf. We don't know what you really teach.
Princess Bride is a great movie. I think it lacks the gravitas of saying it's the best movie of all times. Although my number 1 is directed by the same director. I'll just throw that out.
Spoiler alert.
Mhm.
Okay.
No, but like it does a better job of realizing the purpose of the book. Like if we just wanted the best movies made from books, then we would just go to the lists. But like this does a better job than any of those other movies of realizing the purposes of the book.
We are defining the list. This is why this podcast exists, because we are the list. And I don't think the lists necessarily do justice to what some of us. I mean, we're all coming with our own perspectives, and I appreciate that. But I don't think all of the lists have the best movies made from books.
I considered Princess Bride. I considered it. And for me, it doesn't have that life's big questions, the gravitas component of it. It's a great movie. I love it, but for me, it just didn't have that.
Okay.
That's inconceivable.
Okay. My number two movie made from a book is in fact a classic. which is To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh.
In grade school, I read To Kill a Mockingbird, the old red hardback edition, probably the school edition, or something that's very durable in a kid's backpack and getting passed down year after year. It wasn't until high school, when I read that again in a high school English class, that we then followed it by watching the movie by Gregory Peck, which, of course, I had family members that had said, oh, yeah, of course they'd seen the movie. And I think that To Kill a Mockingbird, I think fits this genre perfectly for me. It's my number 2 because both of those works stand independently. The movie by Gregory Peck is iconic. The book, of course, is a work of genius. And you can see the connection between the two without each one taking too many liberties, right? It doesn't go off, the movie doesn't go off script of the book. It adds enough elements. It can't put everything in there, obviously, but it goes through enough elements to get through the storyline. Like To Kill a Mockingbird is a relatively shorter classic book, but at one point in time, I heard that 2 million school kids a year read To Kill a Mockingbird. I don't know if that's necessarily true today, but Gregory Peck's performance was iconic. I don't remember if it won any Academy Awards, but I think both the movie can stand alone as well as enhance the book. So To Kill a Mockingbird is my number 2. And the fact that neither of you have jumped in to tell me why I'm wrong means that it must be a good pick. Okay.
It's a good pick.
Okay.
I'll give you
I can't quibble with it, but I would say the movie isn't better than the book.
I think the movie, well, sure, but of course Gregory Peck brought, I mean, this is an iconic role, right? He brought a performance to that movie that really helps define, when you read the book, define who that character is, right? And so you really do, you really do. I think he kind of adds to it, enhances it. Okay, we're off. So my number 2 is To Kill a Mockingbird. Okay, we're off to our number 1s. Don Patterson, here we go.
Okay, yeah, Ed, you should wince a little bit. Okay, so again, my category is not commercial success or fidelity to the original book. It's emotional impact, faithfulness to the core themes, and cinematic achievement. Okay, so my number 1 is deeply personal and nostalgic. It is the movie Stand By Me. The movie Stand By Me, based on a book called The Body by Stephen King. It's a story about coming of age and male friendship and emotional growth. It's very authentic. It's like I think it's a 1986 movie, so it's very much like in its time. It's not epic. It's very much a very character-driven, just experience of young men being thrown into these adult situations before they're really ready and sort of growing up very fast through it. Really, key actors: John Cusack's in it, Corey Feldman's in it, a couple other
in it.
Will Wheaton, yeah.
John Cusack is in it?
Yeah. I think he's the older brother, or one of the older brothers.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. So it's got that kind of that 80s era cast. They just did an amazing job. And it just, for me, it really resonates a lot with the way that I grew up, kind of playing in the woods next to highways and train tracks.
Looking for dead bodies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Looking for dead bodies.
Oh, yeah.
Climbing over chain link fences.
Of course. Yeah.
So it was just very emotional, great acting, legendary soundtrack, funny at different points, not too full of itself, didn't think too highly of itself, but it was a serious movie. Also, Ridley Scott, I think, is the director of it, like Ed's
really?
Princess Bride. I think so, yeah.
Ridley Scott didn't direct Princess Bride. That was Rob Reiner.
Oh, no, Rob Reiner did Stand By Me also. I think. I got to double check that. But
maybe that's right.
I'll look it up. But that's my number 1.
Okay. Ed Song, what's your number 2?
Well, that isn't one of the 3 greatest movies that came from books, but that's a respectable choice. And I'm glad somebody chose Stephen King. Because as many movies have been made from Stephen King novels that somebody should have represented. And actually, I would say that of all the Stephen King books that became movies, maybe that's actually the best one. I mean, might be. Shawshank Redemption is a better movie. And also a movie about masculine growth. and
Yeah,
would
I
have
mean,
reminded
people-
you of your time in prison when you were a young man.
A lot of people rate Shawshank higher, but I Stand By Me is just, I don't know. It is directed by Rob Reiner, by the way, same as Princess Bride.
Yeah, right. That's right.
But you're right. I looked at all the Stephen King movie adaptations, and surprisingly, they were all fun movies. But I don't think any of them really rose to the level of like really being milestones as much as Stand By Me. I was thinking maybe Firestarter, but like I couldn't pull the trigger on that one. The original.
Okay. My number one is a very well-known book. It's a great book of literature. Some people might say that maybe it's one of the greatest works of children's literature. If it's not the greatest work of children's literature, it's probably written by the person who is the greatest author of children's literature.
Paddington
Sorry,
2.
J.K. Rowling, I ain't talking about you. Again, this is a strictly no wands podcast. And as great as this book is, and we've all read this book, and it's a beloved book, but I actually think that the movie is better than the book, and it does a better job realizing the wonder and the weirdness and the purpose of the book. And of course, I'm talking about Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
Okay. All right.
Are we okay with this, or is that
one of my favorite?
I'm about to slap you down.
One of my favorite books of all times. I'm waiting for your discussion of the movie.
It's glorious and it's timeless. It's more or less faithful to the book itself.
Wait,
the
please,
performance,
for the love of everything holy, tell me you're talking about Gene Wilder and not Johnny.
Oh, yeah, I should have clarified. I am certainly talking about the original.
Really clear about that.
Okay, thank you.
I haven't even seen the second one, and it made me upset when I heard that they were doing. But Gene Wilder's performance is truly excellent. He does an incredible job of like capturing the weirdness, and you can't quite trust this guy. I saw this one little interview of Gene Wilder where he talked about how he improv'd the scene in the very beginning of the movie when we first meet Willy Wonka, when he comes out and he's hobbling with the cane, and then he falls, but then does a somersault and lands on his feet. Like, he came up with that idea. That was he talked about how he liked that particular idea because it immediately communicates that you can't trust this guy, but also communicates like his childlike nature and play. I think all of the characters just like so perfectly capture. Charlie captures who Charlie is. Veruca Salt captures who Veruca Salt is, and so forth and so on. I think they filmed it in some German town, but there's something about like the clay tiles of the town that, even though the movie I think was made in the late 70s, I guess, but there's just like, and it certainly comes across as old, but there's a kind of a timelessness about it that I think, as hard as it is, I think actually surpasses the book. And so Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, to me, is the greatest movie made from a book.
Now, listen, I will say for the record, respectable choice. At one point in time in my childhood, in fact, I read the book, and there's some sequels to it, which are a little bit more weird.
Yeah.
After having seen the movie. But of course, the movie is a classic. I can see why it would make your list. Before I reveal my number one, I do want to share just really quickly some obvious, really great movies made from really great books. You could argue that the first one of those would have been Gone with the Wind. I've only seen part of the movie. I've never read the book, but that was kind of one of the first great movies that achieved kind of cinematic success based on the book, which was, of course, a big hit. The Wizard of Oz. We haven't spoken about The Wizard of Oz, which was in the late 1800s, early 1900s, a very classic series of books, and then turned into kind of an iconic movie, one of the early movies to really take advantage of color. But my number one movie made from a book, I see the wincing. I've got to go. Osseo Harry Potter. Specifically, the first one.
Oh, somebody had to do it. I knew somebody was going to do it.
Yep. Now, listen, I looked this up. So the first Harry Potter was made right around the time that the fourth book came out. So, I kept thinking of the whole Harry Potter series as kind of a slow burn, but I believe it was Warner Brothers that bought the rights only a couple of years after the first book was written. And so the reason, and I think the first book does the best of really sticking to the story. The first movie does the best of sticking to the story of the first book. Of course, after that, the books start getting significantly longer. The movies get longer as well, and the movies have to try to kind of piece together what they're doing. Of course,
and they get dark.
And they get dark, and the last book ends up getting turned into 2 movies. Obviously to try to get all the information in, but also get the money as well.
Get all the information in.
Yeah.
It was about getting all the
for
information
artistic
in.
purposes. It wasn't for the fact that they're going to make another $1 billion.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And a theme park.
But listen, I still think when you now when you go back and you read the books, you see them differently with the movies. And I think for kids who are reading the series, I have some good friends who are reading through the Harry Potter series, but they're telling their kids you can only watch the movie after you read the book. And so I appreciate that, because I think that the literature genre is still one to really immerse our kids in, really have them take advantage of. And I think that Harry Potter, the first movie, is, in my mind, the best movie that's made from a book.
Wow.
Okay, well,
I'll say this.
Yeah.
It is the case that like the movie does an incredible job of realizing the world, and in that way pays a service to the book. And like that movie is cast, maybe like there's no movie that's been better cast than that movie.
Very well
like
cast.
Every character,
and it does.
Yeah, and I think going back to iconic performances, I think the whole crew, and I mean all the way from Daniel Radcliffe to many of the other better known actors, and I'm saying actors in both the male and the female gender, who played some of the other parts there, right? It was very well cast, and you really see the development of the performances over the whole life of the whole movie series. So I think Harry Potter, the first movie, really does, and of course the first book is very encapsulated as well, right? You get to the end of Harry Potter's first year, they win the what is it, the House Cup or something like that, and Neville gets to be the hero. If you haven't read the book, spoiler alert, okay, and it's just a very great first book that could stand alone, and I think the movie does that as well. So
I think movies like that, like Fellowship of the Rings, it's just so fun to see the movie show you the world that you've read, right? Like you've read the world, you know how it works, there's magic and stuff, and then to see it sort of come to life on the screen is so fun. So like it's hard to beat that first movie where you're being introduced to the world and the effects and everything.
And let's just be clear, those of you watching at home, go back earlier in the podcast and notice that I wasn't the one that was slamming Don Patterson when he said Lord of the Rings. It didn't make my top 3 list, but I don't have any problem with it. I mean, I didn't have any issue with it. So, okay, let's go through and let's again just go our 3, 2, 1 in order. Don, you go ahead and start us off.
Okay, my just to remind everyone, none of mine were actually miniseries. Mine were all movies, and they are characterized by masculinity, questions of like mental health and mental wellness, and then big questions in life. Number 3, Fight Club. Number 2, Lord of the Rings, specifically Fellowship of the Rings, the first one. Number 1, Stand By Me.
Okay, Ed Song.
I also will say that all of mine are movies, and none of them are works of artistic abominations that anger the tortured souls of
the Academy,
dead authors. My number 3 is Jaws. My number 2 was Princess Bride. My number 1 was Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
And my number 3, I just will say my number 3. They're only my number 3 for now. If there is ever a movie version of the book Pride and Prejudice and Zombies, then of course that may very well replace my top 3, since I clearly have both Jane Austen and wands in my list. Oh, the audacity. Okay. So my number 3, Pride and Prejudice, specifically the 1995, we call it the Colin Firth edition. Number 2, To Kill a Mockingbird. No shame there. Number 1, Harry Potter and either the Sorcerer's, or if you want to go old school, the Philosopher's Stone. So, so those are our 3. Okay. Well, with all other debate being put on hold until our next meeting, this is the 3 for 3 podcast. Thanks for hanging with us for this extra long episode. Maybe you'll catch a few Easter eggs at the end, and we look forward to seeing you next time when these three gentlemen have our very specific opinions about our next topic. We look forward to seeing you. Have a great day.
Looking forward to the movie adaptation of Blood Oil. Bye.
Restless Devices. Where's the movie adaptation of Restless Devices?
Well, casting has begun for Restless Devices, and so if you want to play the role of the author's husband,
I've got 130 community college students playing the role of distracted technological people.
Yeah, super.
Yeah,
have their people get in touch with my people, and we'll work it out.
Yeah.
Goodbye.